the Association of South Asian Midwives, which is an organisation founded by, I'll let them introduce themselves, our three colleagues here that came in, which really it's a platform for South Asian midwifery workforce and birthing community to raise awareness and to support South Asian midwives in the community, and to address some of the health inequalities that we've seen, especially from the latest Embrace report. And they're going to do a presentation for us and have some question and answers at the end. So thank you so much for coming.
My name's Sundas and I'm one of the co-founders of Association of South Asian Midwives.
Hello everybody, my name is Benash and I'm also one of the co-founders of Association of South Asian Midwives.
And I'm Nafiza. I'm also a co-founder of Association of South Asian Midwives. Hi everybody, lovely to meet you all.
So we are the Association of South Asian Midwives, and we're very, very glad to be here today to be presenting why we started, how we started, what we were about, what we've been doing, and what we hope to do. Our team is made up of Benash, Nafiza, and myself, Sundas. And I'll let Benash introduce herself.
So my name is Benash and I qualified in 2011 as a midwife, and I always talk about my journey into midwifery because I think it was one of my points of biggest realizations in my life about how, and it was my first realization about how there was a difference in my culture around a certain thing. I've done a lot of reflection and realized bias and everything a lot since then, but actually this was the first time where I identified how I was treated differently, and that was when I applied for midwifery. I actually wasn't sure if I wanted to do what I wanted to do at college. I read 5 prospectuses back to front, and the 2 things that spoke out to me were teaching and midwifery, and I couldn't decide, so I flipped a coin. Not advocating that everyone flip a coin to choose what career you're gonna do, but actually it was one of those things that really I believe in fate, and for me, when I flipped that coin, it landed on midwifery. I was told I'm not going to get into midwifery. I was absolutely told it's a really difficult course to get into, you're not going to get into it. So I had a plan B, which was take a gap year and go into teaching the next year. Lo and behold, I went for interviews. The first 4 interviews I didn't get, and my last option was an interview where things were done differently. The recruiters, or I say the recruiters, but it was a full day event. There was lots of activities, but the interview itself was problem-based learning, and it was a non-midwifery related question that was on the board. It was, and I remember it to this day, you're planning a trip to the Arctic. How and what are you going to do? And before this, I realized I hadn't talked about midwifery, and I didn't really know a lot about midwifery, so I'd only had the time between sending in my UCAS application and going to my interviews to learn as much as I could about midwifery, which was very self-taught, so I didn't know a lot. But I could plan a trip to the Arctic if someone tells me how to plan a trip to the Arctic. And in my group, people were asking very practical questions like, do people know how much it's going to cost? Do they know times? Do they know what kind of outfits they're going to wear, etc.? I was like, are people aware that they're not going to have any phone calls to call home and connect their family and loved ones with? Are people aware that they might come back to bad news? And you know, are they psychologically aware and prepared? Because for me, I grew up in a culture where I would always let my parents know where I'm at, and I would always connect with them on a regular basis. I was still living at home, so my lens was different. I got in based on the back of that. And I remember once a lecturer told me, you know what, your perspective was just brilliant. You were thinking outside of the box. And I had to make sure that you came into midwifery for that reason. And I now think back and I think my box was different. I wasn't outside of that box. It was just the box that I had been in was different. So my viewpoint was different. I then went home and I told my mum that I got into midwifery. And my mum told me my grandma was a village midwife. And I was born in Kashmir. I was the youngest of 6. And my grandma had been there for the home births for every single one of my siblings. By my time, she'd retired. So my aunt, who was her apprentice, attended my birth under her watchful eyes. But there was a family connection. And despite the fact that there was such a close family connection, I had never talked about midwifery, maternity, pregnancy within my own home. Because in my strict, conservative household, it wasn't a norm within the culture to have those kind of conversations until you're either married or maybe even pregnant yourself. So I just feel like it's so important to say that. And then in my journey in midwifery, I've traveled to lots of different places. I worked abroad and I've worked within numerous trusts in the UK. But if I was to 2 years ago show you what I had done, I would literally have one slide, one sentence on here, which was a midwife here in these locations. Because up until 2020, when I started talking about health inequalities, about barriers, unconscious bias, how that affects cares, how that affects midwives, how that affects our service users and our families that we support, I wasn't doing any of these things. And now I'm doing all of these and a few. And yes, it's come full circle because I am a student again and I'm doing my master's right now. So that's a brief, quick intro to me. I'm going to hand over to Nafiza.
Hello everybody, I'm Nafiza Anwar. I'm another, as you all know, I'm another director now. Okay, so let's follow on from Benash. So I was inspired to become a midwife at my own. I was married very young and I was 17, 18 when I had my first child, and the midwife who looked after me was amazing because, again, as Benash said, in our community, okay, you get pregnant. I didn't have that conversation with my parents, but with my mum about, yeah, you're pregnant now, what will you face, what will you not face? We never had that conversation. So when I went into labour, this midwife, she sort of took on that role and she was so kind, so caring. And at that time, I just thought, I want to be her. I was so inspired by her. At that time when I applied, there was a 2-year waiting list. So unfortunately, I didn't manage to get into midwifery then. I did my nursing. And when I went for my interview, it was at that point that I realized that there was, you know, yeah, we were different, because one of the questions, one of the interviewers asked me at the end of my interview was, oh, okay, so you're going into, you're coming into nursing, but won't grandma want another baby bouncing on her knee? And I didn't have a response to that because I was just so shocked. And, you know, you're young, you're naive, and I didn't challenge it or say anything. So anyway, I did my nursing. And then, as I said, there was a 2-year sort of waiting list. So I sort of did my nursing and I came across lots of things during my nursing, saw things that happened on the wards, how people were treated differently. You know, if you came from a different background, you were treated differently. And that really struck me. I then somehow got into international development work. I went overseas and I got into sort of seeing what maternity systems or health facilities were like overseas. And again, I saw that, you know, overseas it was really bad. The care that women got, it just struck me, and that sort of ignited my passion again to do midwifery. So when I returned to England, I applied, I got in, but I found that yes, initially it was great, but I was a minority. I was the only South Asian midwife within my cohort, and within my trust, I was the only South Asian midwife. And over time, you sort of felt really cornered, isolated, lonely, and you sort of lost your voice. You know, you became invisible. So that sort of, to cut a long sort of story short, throughout my sort of 22 years, you know, I've loved my job, but I was a minority within a minority. And this last year has given me that voice. ASAM has given me that voice. And I've met these 2 wonderful associates. And you know, I feel that there is so much out there to do, and we need to be that voice for those silent women, for those silent midwives from our communities, and this is what we want to do. And I always say to people, I've been in a cage all these years, a bird in a cage, but now that door has been opened and I'm flying, and I don't want to put my feet down.
Hi everyone, so I'm Sundas again. I've not been a midwife long. I completed my midwifery studies from King's College in 2018, and just last month I just revalidated. So I started my journey as a precepting midwife at Wrightington, Wigan and Lee, and whilst I was there, well actually whilst I was studying midwifery, I came across this charity at the university called Maternal Aid Association, and it was a group of students who, well, one in particular who'd gone over to Bangladesh, and he'd seen things that really alarmed him, and he came back and he said, I need to do something about it. So I created this charity to help improve maternal health in resource poor settings, and I worked with that charity for about 3 years, worked on maternal health seminars, maternal education, and whilst I was at Wigan Hospital, I went out to Bangladesh, went there for 2 weeks, and we ran health camps, maternal health camps, educational seminars, seminars for fathers-to-be, menstrual health seminars. It was great. It was a great experience. Such striking differences to what I was used to what I was essentially wrapped in cotton wool here in the UK. But it all sort of started from there. I noticed there was an ASAM conference, and I thought, oh, I've been doing this work with Maternal Aid Association. I'll just pop, like, send in an abstract and see if so I sent in this abstract about the work that was being done by Maternal Aid Association, not really thinking that, you know, it'd go anywhere. I've been a midwife 9 months, but thankfully I got the chance to speak about the amazing work of the charity. And on the conference, I'd noticed that that Nafiza was going to be there, and I'd actually researched her, like almost stalked her before this conference, and I was like, oh, she's had so much experience, this is amazing, I really want the chance to speak to her. But unfortunately I didn't get to on the conference, but I met Benash. I remember Benash saying to me that this was the first time that she'd seen somebody else who wears a hijab at one of these conferences. And we just sat down and we just started talking over coffee and a croissant. And our experiences were so similar. We spoke about the inequalities, we spoke about what we'd seen, and bear in mind at this time I'd only been a midwife for 9 months, so not a long time at all. But I'd seen racism, I'd seen discrimination, I'd seen stereotypes. I'd been so naive, even as a student, when you'd hear things, or the unconscious bias or conscious bias, or the little remarks that, you know, they just slide under the carpet. And we just spoke, and then I finally got the courage to message Nafiza and thought, oh, I really want to meet up with her. We met up, and it just all connected. It was like, oh, actually, we're 3 people who have very similar experiences, are from a South Asian background, and we've noticed there's this gap. You know, there's no representation for South Asian midwives in maternity care, in midwifery. I mean, when I was a student, there was nobody who looked like me that I could go up to, who could understand some of the certain things that I was going through. But meeting Benash and Nafiza, it was like, oh, actually, yes, I've got that now. And we just sort of came together from then. ASAM was born, essentially. At the moment, I work at East Lancashire Hospitals, and I work on a diabetic continuity team midwife. It's great. And again, we cover a demographic which is largely South Asian population. And for me, being able to educate, support, empower all of these people, really, it's very core to my values. And being able to be a part of something like ASAM has essentially changed my life. You know, not even being dramatic, it has changed my life. It's changed my mindset on things. It's made me realize that if there is something you want to do, and if you feel like there is something that needs to be done, the only person that can do it is yourself. You know, if you feel like it, go and do it yourself. It's more action and less talking. And I think we'll all agree that we've just had years and years and years and years of just talking and just reports, and, you know, the same thing being churned into these reports of the inequalities, but nothing actually ever being done about it. And ASAM was that step for all of us, that let's do something about it. Aside from midwifery and ASAM, I enjoy blogging. I have a little blog called Sundas the Midwife. I enjoy baking, cooking, love the outdoors. So that's a little bit about me. This picture is a picture that we took October 2019, the 22nd of October 2019, where we'd all decided, oh, let's meet up. So we'd all we'd been doing is speaking, you know, over a WhatsApp group, and we thought, oh, let's just meet up and let's see what we can put down on paper. And it was a restaurant in Tamatanga in Birmingham, and the food was great. And we just sat there for hours, really. And I mean, I've got this video of us saying, oh, what should we call this thing? You know, let's do something. What should we call it? And was essentially saying the Association of South Asian Midwives. And at that point, not realizing where we'd be today. And like Benash and Nafiza, I'm sure you remember this, of the lady who was sat next to us. And she just turned around and she said, look, I've been listening in on your conversation and it's amazing. And she said that this is what needs to happen. And I think that lady, wherever she is, she gave us that bit of a boost as well, that yes, like this is something that actually needs to happen. I will let Benash and Nafiza talk about our visions.
It's funny you mentioned that lady, because I feel like that lady, wherever she is, she witnessed the birth. She was our kind of attendant, wasn't she? Yeah. And it's I hope one day we can link back up with her. But we had our first official ever chai and chat, and would you believe it, the name ASAM came because we were talking about, you know, what's one thing that us Asians love, and it's like the Brits, we like a little bit of tea, and ASAM tea is very much available. I laugh and I joke because I think that was a defense mechanism I developed in the years, because when I faced discrimination or bias, I had to joke about it. So I realized that my jokes, I'm a comedian, and when I'm not, I want to be the light, and we all wanted to be that change. And we had a vision that we were able to support and raise that awareness and understanding in 3 different ways, really, because we wanted to support the communities that we care for, specifically South Asian communities, because we understand them in a different level. We understand the barriers that are faced by those communities, and we wanted to have conversations with those communities around some of the taboo subjects that can go unaddressed, which are mental health, infertility, loss, and so much more. But those things can have long-term effects on health outcomes, and years of ill health as well. So one of the groups that we wanted to support, one of our visions, was to be able to support our South Asian communities. The other was to be able to share what we knew, and learning that we would gain with our workforce, with our whole maternity workforce, so that they were able to better understand the barriers that are faced by our communities. And Nafiza can tell you our third vision.
And the third vision is actually working with the workforce, because you know, the workforce is important, and we are a very small workforce in a big workforce from the South Asian community, and it's to support that workforce, to mentor them, to provide a safe space, to provide signposting, because again, as midwives or health professionals from a minority group, we have faced barriers within our career progression, within the workforce. You know, we don't get the same, I'm going to call it perks, as our white British counterparts get. And, you know, we just wanted, we understood that because we've all lived through that, and we wanted to support that those particular things. So one of the things that we are providing and want to provide is, you know, mentorship, coaching, and all those things to lift up, and also to sort of try and promote the recruitment, because understanding why is it that there is such a small percentage of midwives from the South Asian community. So it's like for us to be sort of role models and try and get out there, talk to our communities, and try and you know, increase the number of South Asian women, men coming into the profession, and understanding what those barriers are, and improving that recruitment process, because we need representation within the workforce to enable change and improve the care that our women in the communities get.
And sometimes those barriers and those conversations are with universities about what are your recruitment processes, what are your applicants going through, are they biased, do they need to be decolonized, and it's the same within the actual work that we do in provider level, and asking them the questions, what is your job description like, what is on your desirable list? Isn't being multilingual something that should be desirable? Because that is a skill, and why isn't that considered desirable? Because if someone was able to speak German and Portuguese and another European language, that would be very much celebrated and be welcomed. But why isn't being able to speak Hindi or Punjabi or a South Asian language or a different language not considered the same level of skill? If you look within the workforce, there is extremely low levels of representation of South Asian communities, and considering we are potentially the largest ethnic minority community within the UK, we are disproportionately low levels of South Asian midwives. I think it's something like 2.4% of the registration, and that's dual qualified. So some of these midwives that are dual qualified are potentially working as nurses, but still that's the level we're looking at. And now you look at your nationally speaking, when the last census was done, I think 7% of the UK was from South Asian communities. So this disproportion is something we're very conscious of and working towards. Recruitment and support is Sundas's field, so I'll let Sundas tell us what she's doing with our student midwives and how she's doing brilliant work with ensuring that we are retaining.
Just talking about why it's so difficult to, or why we don't see as much representation of South Asian people as midwives. I always call it a double-edged sword. So you have things like the recruitment process, you have the inequalities, you have the biases that exist within the system, but outside of the system and within the community, there are also problems. You know, when I first trained, when I went down to London to become a midwife, people would see my parents and they'd say to them, why have you let your daughter do that? It's a dirty job. She's unmarried. She shouldn't be talking about these things. It's shameful. And I mean, the conversations we have at the table have completely changed since I become a midwife, but that's not the case for a lot of people. And I feel like, or I do actually, I believe that as universities, as workplaces, we do need to do more to recruit individuals from these communities. And what I have been doing as part of ASAM, actually before even ASAM, I had young girls reach out to me who wanted to become midwives, but they don't know where to start, or they wanted somebody to look at the personal statement, they don't know who to ask. And essentially I was just helping them out with their personal statements, with the whole recruitment process, how to navigate the recruitment process, what sort of experience they'll need. These girls essentially needed somebody who they could turn to, who would support them. And this is one of the reasons why when we opened our membership, I was really, really eager to support student midwives. So essentially supporting them with interviews, with the interview process, with personal statements. Been doing talks at colleges. So last month we were at a college close by to me. I'm just talking about essentially ASAM, midwifery, why we need more midwives, why it's, and just being honest about it. And it was interesting because a lot of them, and even a lot of the tutors, they weren't aware of the issues that exist, and these were tutors in health and social care, and that from that presentation everyone came away and said that I've learned something from this, and that's what we want to do. We want to educate, we want to give individuals the information, the education, the support to be able to go and pursue this career that they really want to. So why a dirty profession? I'm just going to answer that now. That's our thinking. For a lot of people, well, in my community, well, not all of them, but in the community and in the large extended family, it was considered that I shouldn't be talking about these things. For someone who's not had a baby, for someone who's not married, it is taboo for me to be talking about vaginas, periods, contraception. Even now, when I'm doing discharge talks and it's a South Asian family, I get looks, or I get, oh no, we don't need to talk about that when I discuss contraception. So it is still very much taboo in the community. I am all for challenging these behaviours, whether that's within my community, my family, or within the healthcare system. I think I spent quite a long time as a student, or in that first year or so, just being very, very naive and not realising that I had a voice, and not realising I could use the voice that I had, because I was this one Pakistani girl who, yeah, that's it, that's what you were, well, I felt like I was seen as, and you almost feel like you've got to fit into this stereotype, which I see now in practice of the Asian princesses, which I hear so much of, and I now challenge. 4 years ago, I would have just kept quiet and kept walking because I didn't feel like I could. But the empowerment and that I've had since obviously starting ASAM and noticing and realizing that these problems exist, but we can do something about them. Like I said before, it has changed my way of thinking.
And I always I'm fascinated when I have this conversation with you, Sundas, aren't I, around the concept of midwifery as a profession, because even though I didn't have that conversation with my family and my mum about midwifery, in my family we don't consider it a dirty profession, maybe because my grandma was a midwife, maybe because we did things in a different way. Actually, as soon as my mum realized, she was so happy and so proud, and there is that kind of difference in the fact that I was very well supported in doing the profession, because it's a profession for helping women. And when I have heard that conversation or the comment made about, oh, my daughter's going to be a doctor or my son's going to be a doctor, I'm like, why isn't your son going to be a midwife? Why isn't your doctor going to be a midwife? Because wouldn't you, when you're in that space, when you're in labor, when you're in pain, wouldn't you want to see a familiar face or hear a voice that speaks a language that is comforting to you? Because I'm telling you now, the minute I go into a labour room and I can speak a language that is someone's mother tongue, the stress levels automatically decrease. a notch or two, and the relief in the person I'm caring for is almost instantaneous, because already their options and their choices and their understanding of everything that's happening is so much broader.
Definitely, completely agree. Like the amount of times I've heard, you know what I mean, you know what it's like, you know what the culture is like, you know what it's like with the family.
In my experience, when I've been looking after, you know, ladies from the community, and you finished your shift and, you know, they beg you to stay, please, please stay with us. And I have, because you can see that, I don't like to say desperation, but you can see that fear come, because if you leave, well, they're not going to understand, you know, they have to rebuild that relationship. And as Benash said, they know that they don't have to explain themselves to you, because you understand those nuances, you understand where they're coming from, because, you know, health behaviours is very much dependent on how you've been brought up, your culture, your religion. All these have an impact on how you behave. So, you know, if you don't understand that, you are going to assume that, oh, she's being difficult, oh, she's being this, X, Y, and Z. And that's how women are labelled from our communities.
Absolutely. And what you have when you can understand where someone's coming from is you can help them navigate where they want to go, because of the fact that you understand. And I think one of the first things we ever did was we talked about the simple thing about building trust and building understanding. And it starts from, and I'll give my experience. I was 4 years old when I came to the UK, and that's when I started to realize I was different, because I was now different. I came to a place where I was no longer same as everybody else. And I still was Beanish at home. I was Beanish, or Billo, or whatever my mum wanted to call me out of love. And then I went to nursery about 5 months later, not speaking a word of English. And this is the one, I think, is my earliest memory I have, being left in nursery and seeing my dad walk away and not knowing a word of English and just watching. That's the memory I have. But I also know that it was the time I went from being Beanish to being Benash. And then I became Ben or Ash or whatever English acronym or anglicised version of my name was easier for people who didn't know or want to make effort to pronounce my name were pronouncing it. So the first lesson I learnt, and I know this now as an adult after reflecting, but back then the first lesson I learnt was, to fit in, I have to edit myself. When we are talking to people we're caring for, let's let them know that they don't have to edit themselves. Let's say, I understand you are using, you know, like I will, for a long time I say, hi, my name's Benash, because it was easier for me to say that than having to correct someone over and over again. But now I say, I don't correct people over and over again. I correct them once, and every time when I refer to myself, I say Beanish, and eventually they understand and they start to do that. But the people we're caring for, we want them to listen to us, and we want them to understand us and understand that we're wanting to support them and know that we're listening to them to be able to care for them. So we launched with our Not My Name campaign, which was very small, very simple. It was a conversation around, one of the first things you can do is simply ask the person how they pronounce their name, what the meaning is behind their name. Because often in South Asian cultures, especially if you're from a South Asian subcontinent of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, there's been a lot of thought put into a name. In my community, in my culture, your name has an effect. We believe that your name has an effect on your personality. It's gonna develop the person you're going to become. In certain Indian cultures, in the Hindu religion, you actually want to know exactly what time a baby was born, because depending on the astrology and the alignment of the stars and the moon, the priests make a decision of what letter or what letters should be in the name, because that's going to be the most auspicious name according to astrology for your child. So there's a lot behind a name.
Yeah. And it's also simply about respecting that person, because a name is that person's identity. And if you don't get it right, the impact it has, it makes them feel undervalued. You know, you're not making an effort to actually value that person. So it is important. It might not seem important, but it is.
You know, I just think as midwives, one of the first things we ask parents is, oh, so what are you going to name your child? Yet we won't make the effort to ask somebody what their name is, or how they pronounce their name, or what they would like to be called. And it's just a sign of respect more than anything else. Okay, so this is literally how I felt about, you know, emails. Like, the bare minimum you can do is copy and paste somebody's name. You know, nobody's asking you to say it out loud. But this is a little poem that I created. Dear Khalid, no, that is not my name. That is my surname. No, not Hatija. Yes, she also works here. Yes, I know she also wears a hijab. No, we do not look alike. We are from different ethnic backgrounds. No, not all Asians are Sundas. I mean, not Asians are Sundas. Not all Asians are Indian. Please call me Sundas. Yes, I may have a nickname I go by, but my name is Sundas. Kind regards, Sundas Khalid. And it's essentially what you guys have just been saying in the chat box, you know, saying, oh, dear A, or just completely writing your name wrong. And it's an email. And it's something that we'd all experience. And you know what? It doesn't even matter what culture you're from. It's everyone experiences it. And this is one of the basis of this campaign, the Not My Name campaign. And in that little the little cartoon, it says, why am I apologizing? Because that's what I would do. Oh, sorry, that's not my name. But why am I apologizing for somebody else calling me something else? We received a lot of feedback. We had so many people emailing messages saying, actually, like, this is what we've experienced. We've experienced it as well. And I remember challenging this at work. And we have something at work that says that, oh, you need to be asking somebody what my name is. And I was told by another midwife, yes, but we do that. But it says we do that. I said, yeah, in theory, it says that this is something we should be doing, but how many times are we actually doing it? How many times are we actually asking somebody their name, as opposed to just looking at the name on a piece of paper and abbreviating it, you know, shortening that name, maybe just the first three letters of that name. I could go on and on about the Not My Name campaign, but Benash and Nafiza will tell you what else we've been up to over this past year.
It leads us very nicely onto the experiences of ethnically marginalised midwives. We very much reached out to the midwifery workforce with our amazing counterparts, the Society of African and Caribbean Midwives, and actually from there we decided that actually we realised that there's discrimination faced across the board by marginalised midwives. And even though ASAM was started by us for South Asian counterparts, we realised that actually there's also marginalised midwives across the board. And since then, we've always supported anyone who's marginalised within the workforce, because we realised that we have the capacity to do that, and we have the ability to understand. And yes, it may be presenting in a different way and different forms, and stereotypes and presumptions are different for different communities, but the outcome is the same. The feeling of othering, the feeling of being diminished or feeling less, it's the same, and that affects us in the same way. So we can still support, mentor, coach, give pastoral support, and raise awareness around those issues. So this is available online. Nafiza can tell you about the perinatal mental health support work we did.
So
Tonic.
Yeah, so we were approached by an organisation called Tonic, and they were developing their perinatal mental health services to be in line with serving the minoritized communities within their sort of demographics. And it was basically supporting them to set up questionnaires that would be used in gaining information from these communities. So initially, you know, we were we supported with looking at the questions that they developed, going through that and making those questions appropriate, because I remember our first draft, you'll remember, Benash, when we had the first draft, both Benash and I thought, oh, it won't take long, but we actually literally changed, I think 60%, we rewrote the questions because they weren't appropriate for the communities. And we thought, when we submitted it back, we thought, oh my God, you know, what are they gonna, you know, we completely trashed their questionnaire. But in fact, they were very grateful. And because we could see it from, because we're from those communities, we could see what would work and what wouldn't work and what would be appropriate. So so that was a piece of work that we did, and they have developed that that questionnaire and are using it currently within their services.
And we'll be launching the report that was revolved around that very soon as well. This is ongoing work, and Sundas helped with the next bit, didn't you, Sundas?
Yes, so over to you.
So am I on? No. So the perpetration of domestic abuse by those within minoritized communities, again, it was with this organisation Tonic, funded by the Home Office, and essentially it was working with this organisation and discussing the community, you know, discussing the culture, discussing the cultural nuances, discussing what abuse looks like to individuals within that community. And it was at that point I realised that there wasn't representation, you know, and I just felt glad that ASAM was there to be able to represent these communities and to be able to provide that outlook, you know, that to provide the information for these reports, you know, for these guidances for different demographics, you know, and that report is actually out, and I believe it's on our website. If it's not, it will probably be going on our website in the next few days. But again, it's just representing the community, you know, and being able to represent the community. And obviously we've got the ASAM membership. So I've spoken about what I do for the student midwife membership, but Benash and Nafiza can talk to you about midwife membership and pastoral support that we do offer.
And actually, one of the things that's across the board for both students and not students is the ability to access. We've had to put a pause due to workforce and everyone's exhaustion, but we'll be running them very soon. Is our specialist will have well-being sessions just to take care of each other, have the ability to just connect and vent and debrief, because I feel like that's definitely something that everyone needs. But also there are sessions coming up with specialists, because what we talk about when we talk about coaching and development is we want these sessions to be development related. So those who are student members or midwife members will have the opportunity to come and learn from specialists within the midwifery field that are across the board, that will be doing special teachings in different fields within midwifery at different levels, so that people can realise what opportunities there are. Because often these conversations can and have historically been people who have been on that pathway, or people who have been guided that way, that haven't looked like us, have had those opportunities. So we want to make sure there's awareness of what's out there. We want to make sure people are going into the fields that they are most passionate about, that they're aware that they can go into them. And we are offering pastoral support for people who are being discriminated. In my field, I specialise in supporting midwives who have faced, midwives and student midwives who have faced discrimination at work. I work with the regulatory bodies to be able to make sure that appropriate support is given and give a side view and understanding around the bias aspects of things. And we have respectful challenge, but that challenge is raised and that voice is raised in the appropriate ways, in the appropriate manners, because we can't keep letting things slide. That's been a problem.
And following on from that, pastoral care, I mean, everybody needs a safe space. You know, you've had a bad day at work, or you've had certain issues, you need a safe space to come and just to offload and feel supported, and just for someone to listen. So we in ASAM, we're hoping, well, we're providing that as well for our student midwives and midwives to come, talk, and just reflect, and for someone to listen and understand and give them that support that they need, which more than often, I mean, in my experience, there is no safe space, unfortunately, and there was never anywhere that you could go to, because you always, you know, if you go and show your weakness, it could be used against you. So yeah, so we're hoping to solve that and provide that space.
I think one of the aims as well of having this membership is to create a better future for midwives, for future midwives. You know, between us, we've all experienced the racism, the discrimination, you know, the inequalities, but we want to put a stop to that. And we do believe that having this support system in place does that for this community of midwives.
And I think,
yeah,
sorry, so, and I think it's so important because obviously with COVID, with the Black Lives Matter campaign and everything, COVID has shone that light and made it even more obvious that it is our communities that are the ones that are having those adverse outcomes. And within the workforce, it's us who are facing the inequalities, the inequities, and it's about ensuring that we lift our colleagues. It's not about us. You know, we are, I mean, for me, you know, I'm nearly at the end of my career. It is about the next workforce. It's about ensuring that those midwives don't face what we face. You know, it's about lifting them up and providing that sort of signposting, that support.
We're not letting you leave that soon. I don't know what you're thinking about, but we're keeping you on for a little bit longer. But the reality is, what you find is when there's discrimination, when there's bias, the people that start working on it are those who it's affecting the most. So actually, we know health inequalities have been around for a long time. We know the data has highlighted it for a long time. And actually, all the conferences that are going on and have been going on for a while highlight this over and over, and actually it's regurgitating of the data. So we've been collaborating with Abuela Doulas to bring you and everyone who wants it a conference that tackles these issues by sharing good practice, because those people who have been affected by it have already got good practice going in their areas. They're people that recognize an issue, that went out of a system and developed a way of working to help benefit those communities that are affected the most, because it was personal to them, it affected people around them. And that has been going on historically, but they have not been showcased or highlighted or raised into profile in the platform. So we decided, when you're not invited to the table, you make your own table and you invite your own guests. So that is what Through the Dark Lens conference is. It's highlighting good practice. It's highlighting where people are already doing this work to address health inequalities. It's giving people that attend the toolkits and the skills that they can go and start using straight away the next day in their local places. Because at the end of the day, like we said before, I know we're robbing it off a song, but a little less conversation, a little more action, please.
And I think more than anything, it's a celebration, you know, to celebrate the Black and Brown excellence in perinatal health. And I believe Jane's just popped some information on the chat about the conference. We'll go into it in more detail as well in the next few slides. One of the first things we did when we thought, oh, let's do something with ASAM, was June 2020. I liked to share the timeline because I think it's important just to see what we've done and how far we've come. So October 2019 is when we first met. June 2020 was when we created this Instagram page and thought, oh, let's take experiences, you know. So we asked South Asian women and families what their experience of birth was. We didn't ask for good or bad, we just said we want your experience. And these are some of the quotes from the stories that we've had. So I'll read these out to you. Some staff spoke to me in a loud voice when they saw my brown face. This experience traumatized me to not have any more children. I felt like I was treated quite unequally to the rest of the ladies. I felt so abandoned. I often wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that I was South Asian. my first experience has traumatized me so much, I can't cope to think about having another child. These are lived experiences, and some of the responses that we've got, these women had never spoken to anybody about what they've been through. I remember like just sharing all these stories that we were getting, and it was completely heartbreaking. But part of me was not surprised. Obviously working within the system, part of me was not surprised, but what hurt me was that I could well be one of these people, you know, this could happen to me. I always think growing up, I always thought the hospital, you know, anything to do with the hospital, nurses, doctors, it was a safe space. But I just realized how naive I was, because the care that these individuals have received is from healthcare professionals at the end of the day, and this is how they've been made to feel. So essentially, these experiences and these quotes that we had, it's not okay, and it should never be okay, and nobody should be made to feel like that. Nobody should be made to feel that they feel abandoned, or that they've been so traumatized that they do not want to have any more children. But this is the reality of what we're facing. And essentially what we're facing is discrimination. And again, obviously it says here that UK studies report midwives stereotypically view Asian women as needing less support, generally well supported by their families, or having a lower pain threshold in labour, that they make a fuss, or non-compliant and too demanding. And honestly, I've lost count of the amount of times I've heard Asian princess. It was so easy for individuals, for healthcare professionals to say this, without any understanding of the culture, without any understanding, or without wanting to understand. And I just think, you know, pregnancy, labour, birth, it is painful, you know, and I just don't ever believe that somebody's making a fuss. You know, I've always had this personal midwifery philosophy that I will always treat somebody how I want my own sister to be treated. And my sister just gave birth 3 weeks ago, and I can only commend the midwives who were there with her. But it's just instilled it in me even more that why aren't we all thinking like this? You know, why aren't all healthcare professionals, why aren't all midwives, obstetricians, why aren't we all having that in us, that if this was my family member, if this was my sister, this was my mother, this was my daughter, how would I want her to be treated? You know, you would do everything you possibly could to ensure that this individual has a good experience, you know, that you've listened to them, that their choices have been respected.
And I think what we also need to be very critical of is what we're taking in and where we're taking it in from. And if we're perpetuating the cycles, because if you hear Asian princess and you ever let that come out of your mouth, then you're letting someone else build a stereotype. If you have never challenged why the APGAR score is scoring someone for how pink they are, then you are, you know, really, you know, that was built in the 1950s, where we have systems in place that are structurally out of date. Actually, they were out of date then because they weren't relevant back then, because black skin doesn't really appear pink. And the way we're being taught is not the most effective way. And when the negative stereotypes are being often highlighted for ethnic minority communities more, the balance and the context should also be added for female genital mutilation. Let's take into consideration the fact that FGM is a Western concept. It's not something that those who have it often use or talk about it in that way. So when we ask the question about female genital mutilation, we've already made it alien to the individual we're talking to it about, but we've also alienated it from the people who it is relevant to, which is white counterparts, because clitoral piercing is female genital mutilation, labioplasty, female genital mutilation, if you've got any sort of surgery done in that area. But because they do not think that they are same or similar, they will disown this. And the amount of times I've been rushing to theatre in an emergency situation, trying to undo a clitoral piercing, it's not fun, I tell you. It's not. But this is also, the fact is that it's negatively affecting the other side too. So we really need to be conscious about what we're taking in and how we're presenting it and how it's coming across, because at the end of the day, it affects all those who we care for. And as it quite clearly highlights here, that if we treat people and we're not critical of what we're taking in, the people who we're treating will be disconnected from us. And if they're not able to trust us, how can we care for them effectively? How can we advise them effectively? And how can we treat them appropriately? No wonder health inequalities exist, and no wonder outcomes are poorer, because options are fewer, or given fewer for people, because assumptions are made. The fact, and the amount of times I've heard that, oh, this woman's not going to want a home birth because she lives in a multi-generational household, doesn't mean anything. It just means that I'm now going to think that, and I'm not going to give the next person who lives in a multi-generational household the option for home birth, when actually maybe she's like my mum, who had a home birth for all 6 of her children. So it's really about understanding that and understanding the barriers behind it. The research is out there. It highlights that language is a barrier. We know the issues around language barriers. We know the issues around the lack of interpreting services usage, and actually things aren't being used, or if they are being used, they're not being used adequately, or partners are being used, etc., etc. But we also need to consider the fact that the language is always in English, and it's an articulated version of English. So the issue around what people say and how we understand it, because we're being taught that mental health presents in one way, and you ask questions around, are you feeling low? Well, if someone's learned English and actually speaks relevant English and good English, but they've learned it later on in life, the feeling low question may not be relevant, because they might not understand the colloquialism behind it. And this is where you realize English isn't my first language, because I have to slow down when I'm speaking really fast to pronounce things. But I know that people who have learned English later on in life do not necessarily understand our colloquialisms, our abbreviations, our things that we use quite commonly, and therefore we automatically exclude them from understanding basic things, because not only is the language itself different, but the way the language is being used is not being understood by the person. At the end of the day, we often forget that in certain cultures, if they're asking for help, they've actually potentially asked their mum, their sister. I know someone who asked their neighbour, because they got on well with their neighbour. And then if they're asking for help and calling for help, we shouldn't be putting them up. We should be calling them in earlier, because we know they're more likely to ask for help later anyway. And we know outcomes improve if you call them early on. We know that actually if people have a distrust in us, they're less likely to tell us about cultural practices. And therefore we can't find compromises or support them to be able to be culturally sensitive in their care. And that we also struggled. I mean, I struggle. If I wasn't a midwife, I wouldn't know how to register my pregnancy. And I've been in the UK for the majority of my life. How about someone who isn't familiar with the system? How do they navigate a system? And actually right now over COVID, navigating a system has been even harder than normal. So not understanding a system makes it difficult to navigate. The fact is that our routine ways of working, like antenatal education, is only available in English. And Nafiza, you always tell me about the fact is that someone was you're only allowed to access if you have English, because interpreters weren't available to do that.
So I mean, going on antenatal classes, the better way of doing it would be having antenatal classes in various languages, because that would, address those issues. The women would understand, and this communication is so important, so important, and pain relief as well. Not assuming, because I've heard it many a time that, oh yeah, for instance, Bengali women, they don't have epidural, so it's not even offered. But why take away that option? Don't assume. So it's understanding all those things. Again, being disrespected because of who you are, because you don't speak English. Just because a person doesn't speak English doesn't mean they're they're uneducated. It's because it's not their language. And trust is about building those relationships, and we know that if the service user doesn't have trust with their health provider, they will not access that care, and hence the impact is poor outcomes.
But when you do give them advice, even if it is limited, they will be more likely to believe you that that's the only options available. Therefore, they won't question or ask you for more, and they'll be trusting you as the authority to be giving them all the options, even if they feel like you've been disrespecting them yourself. And that's what the evidence says.
Yeah. And one thing to add about English and the English language is, I think we begin to think that your level of English is a measure of how intelligent you are. When in fact I've cared for individuals who have degrees, who are very highly qualified from different countries, but it doesn't matter, you know, they can't speak English, so the same information is never relayed to them, which again is so problematic. Or if information is relayed to them, it's relayed in a very, it's not relayed in the same way, you know, it's brief. You know, when you think about consent and how much of the consent is informed consent, how many of these individuals and the people that we're caring for are fully informed of the fact that they have a choice, you know. And when you're from a minoritized community, that choice is even smaller, you know, or knowing that you have that choice is even smaller.
And we are proposing to give individualized, personalized care. Yeah. So if we're not giving choice, then, you know, those are the barriers that are faced.
Well, if we're not giving choice, we're not even actually addressing someone's basic human rights, because actually, if these communities complained, we would all be being sued for actually breaching human rights laws, because it's illegal, and choice is one of the first basic human rights when it comes to your health and being able to understand what's there for your health. And I know someone's asked about the conference. I realize the tickets are priced, but the tickets are priced the way they were because what we found is that, and I know because I've been asked to speak at conferences before, that often people, especially women who are from Black and Asian communities, get asked to speak at conferences and not get paid for their time. So the one thing we wanted to make sure was that we are able to pay the people who attend and speak. And that is all of those people that are from Black and Asian communities, because our speakers and our workshops are all people who are identified as Black and brown, are getting paid for their time and are being valued and respected. So that's why we had a conversation at the very beginning, and we had set prices. Now, this has been out for most of the year, and we thought, and we had hoped that most people would know about it, and people that could save up for it would be able to save up for it. But we also have, and I know there's some prizes that are going for.
Yes, I was just going to say that we do have a giveaway at the moment from ASAM, where we're giving away 4 tickets to individuals. All you've got to do is send us an email at contact@asammidwives.co.uk of why you want to join the conference. It does close tomorrow, so if you just get your responses in via email, you've got a chance of obviously winning one of these tickets. But yeah, it's necessary that we are paying these individuals for their expertise and their time. And like Benash and Nafiza, you'll agree with the line, it's absolutely amazing. We've got talks from Dr. Christina Ketchy, Dr. Tina Mistry, Jenny Joseph and Benash herself. Workshops by Carmel Gentle, Kay Lacker,
We wanted to make sure that everything is interactive, but we also wanted to make sure, and one of the things in our cultures is food is so important, because food is about community, and when we're having an online conference, it's difficult to have that sense of community. So we wanted to, first of all, be able to make healthier versions of the foods we eat, because often when you go to GDM clinic, we'll just tell you how much carbs to have less, but the carbs are often very focused on a Western diet, and Western diets don't necessarily translate so well. So we have someone from our brilliant African presenting and having a cook along for African cuisine, and someone from South Asian specialists doing South Asian communities that are GDM appropriate, and recipes will be shared. So everyone that attends will have those recipes that they'll be able to take back and use, but also cook along and enjoy the meal, and have a healthy meal, or a healthy version of a tasty Asian or African meal. And we will also be providing goodie bags, and being able to, you'll be able to use and get different things and different resources from there. So we've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say we haven't had the turnout we would have liked, because we realized that we thought that actually it might be much more popular. It hasn't been as popular as we would like, and I was quite disheartened by this. And then my friend said to me, she said, sometimes you just have to make the space, and once you've made that space and people know it exists, they are more likely to come next time. So we've made the space, and if you can't join us this time, we look forward to you next time, because we will keep doing this and we'll keep moving forward.
These are 3 things to take just from this presentation itself. The first is you. So look at yourself. One of the best things we can be is being self-aware. Be critical, look at yourself, look at your own biases. We all have biases. And I think one thing we should be sure of is that it doesn't matter what your background is, we all have these biases within us. But it's accepting you have these biases and working on how you can, undo what you've learned, all this learned behavior that we've grown up with based on our communities, on where we live. It's undoing it, unlearning it all. Essentially, you are the future. If you want change to happen, you are the person that can initiate that change. The second is time. Take the time to understand all of this. Take the time to appreciate, like the great things, and appreciate how we can change and how we can have positive change, how we can impact. Because this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. ASAM didn't happen overnight. Us unlearning our biases won't happen overnight, but it's making that effort and taking the time to do so. I always believe that anything that's done in a rush, it shouldn't be done. Taking the time, understanding yourself, understanding the processes is going to be beneficial. And the last thing is community. And I'm all for creating a community that has a safe space, but also a brave space, because it takes a lot for individuals to speak about their experiences, to speak about why they're doing what they're doing. And when I think of midwifery and I think of future midwives, and I think you have the chance to create a community that you want to be a part of. And just take it, talk to each other, if there are questions that you want to ask them, be open and create that brave space, create an actual community. This is the future of midwifery. And I mean, I know firsthand what it's like working as a midwife at the moment. It is painful at times, and it's tiring, but when you're surrounded by individuals who are similar-minded or who want that change, it immediately makes things 100 times easier. Just being in that same space as Benash and Nafiza, like it's just being able to speak about the issues that we have all faced has just made things a lot easier. It's created something like ASAM, and that is literally just by talking to people. So I think if 3 midwives who've never met before can create ASAM, just by talking, just think what you can do, anything.
And can I just add, we aren't asking much as health professionals. We are meant to be the caring profession, and we should be respectful and provide equitable care for all women, no matter what. And that's the ask. It doesn't cost anything to be kind, to be respectful.
Yeah, for women and people,
yeah.
Because we are not the only marginalised group. There's plenty of marginalised groups that's out there, and what we can do is we can keep learning more about what experiences are happening across the board, so that we can make it equitable for more, you know, and we challenge ourselves to do that, and we hold ourselves to that, and we hold each other to that as well, and we check each other when our biases come in, and we make sure we're not in an echo chamber, and we reach out to other communities so that we can learn from them too.
And can I add one more thing? Don't let anyone stop you from doing anything. Just go for it, follow your dreams, and don't let anyone take you out.
And this is one of the things we're most proud of. It's something simple, but it means a lot. And this came off the back of the What We Need to Thrive report, which we mentioned earlier, that we collaborated with SOAC with.
You told us. They called you the Indian, your curry breath, they said. They called them your own kind. Go look after them, they said. But your name, they never said. And you told us how you feel, isolated, no navigation where to go, excluded, not supported or guided to progress, overlooked, never given the same opportunities. And you told us what you need to thrive, strong, inclusive leadership, role models and mentors, change in the organizational structures that condone racial inequalities, respect. This is what we need to thrive. Follow the data, invest in midwives.
And our lovely Sundas lended her voice to that, and we thank you very much. Her voice and her poem really captured the real life quotes from midwives, marginalised midwives that we had that came out. So these are some of the ways you can contact us if you want to get in touch with us directly. And we are going to open for questions, but just before we do that, I want to share something a little bit different. And normally on a presentation like this, what you will get is you will get the reference list. And we're not going to give you a reference list for that, all the data we've used today, because actually that's all available out there. If you really wanted, you could find it. You really, really could. What I'm going to share with you is some things and some books that will help you shatter your echo chambers that you may have been in, will give you a different lens. Definitely something we recommend for the reproductive health professionals that are here with us. Have a look and read of these, understand the historical context of race and racism and how that plays, but also these lived experiences and lived real life, current, relevant to the UK experiences of people from marginalised communities and their basic life stories told in a way that's so relevant, that highlights the innumerable issues that they can come up and face. So thank you all.
Yeah,
thank you.
And just to add to that, on our website we do have a blog of lived experiences of South Asian individuals, birth experiences. So have a look at that. You know, it's all real.
That was completely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, and how much work you've done already. So much in such a short period of time. I can't believe it. It's really, really inspiring.
We can't either.
We're going to open the field now and see if anybody's got any questions.
Do you think in a diverse country like the UK, midwives might be offered a foreign language training? You know, from so many of the midwives that I've spoken to at work, they'd be like, oh, it'd be great if you knew another language. It'd be great if you knew another language. Because I'm often the person that will translate or will care for individuals who speak either Urdu or Punjabi because I can translate for them. But the thing is, you know, let's be real about the healthcare system at the moment. I'd say if this is something midwives want to do, they will do it themselves. I mean, I'm going to say the system is broken at the moment. You know, we're all burnt, like midwives are burnt out. We've seen it, we see it every day. It's on the news, you know, as soon as I open like social media, it's midwives' experiences. But I would totally agree that we do need to learn, you know, we do need to be able to learn another language, and it's a skill. But it would fall upon midwives themselves who are willing to do it. You know, anyone can say to me, oh, I'd be really good if I could learn another language. Go and do it. You know, it's less talking, more action, you know.
Yeah. I'm going to add to that, actually. I don't even think you need to learn the full vocabulary and be able to understand the complete context of a full language, because actually I know very limited Arabic. I went in Abu Dhabi and I lived out there while I was working as a midwife for a little bit, and I learned enough Arabic to communicate words that are comical and like that I could just pop into conversations. And that in itself, for someone who speaks Arabic, makes them either laugh at me, which I don't mind them laughing at me, because that automatically brings up their oxytocin levels. It makes them relax. It makes them know that I will make an effort. It makes them know that I don't mind making a fool of myself. And it lets them know that I'm trying to be there and care for them, which opens up a lot, because non-verbal communication can take you a very long way as well.
No, definitely. It's the vibes, it's your body language, all that stuff. You know, even if you don't know a language, how that person, by their gestures, how they are towards you. You don't need language. You know, it can be in your face, in the way you, I don't know, the way you even
connect.
Yeah.
You can connect with people and you might not know their language. One thing I will say is, don't let fear get in your way. The fear of saying something wrong and the fear of offending is you stopping growth for yourself, you stopping growth for the person in front of you, but also even bigger, it's you stopping yourself from having a relationship that could be absolutely fantastic and amazing. One of my best friends is Hannah Thompson, who is a white British midwife, who some of the conversations we have are, I would fear having with a lot of people, and now I don't have, because I've had those conversations with her. I can say she's like a sister to me. When I met her the first time, I would never have had those conversations with her. Now I have those conversations with her on a daily basis, and she's now my sister. So that's a relationship I've built because I got over the fear of having those conversations.
So true. And like you were saying earlier, why don't we value multilingual members of staff? Why don't people ask for it or attribute any sort of meaning to it when it's so incredibly important?
Definitely. I mean, there are people out there within the workforce. I mean, I know I was always, you know, I would put myself forward, but you know, it's not always there. People don't, because there are rules, aren't there, that you can't as a health or whatever. But I think it's investing in your staff that you have, because it is a diverse sort of workforce. You know, people are from all over, and just utilize them.
If we can change one thing that we can do straight away, it's to make sure that when we're in spaces where we have influence, that the people we are talking about and making decisions for are also present in those spaces, because we are making decisions for people that we don't understand. How can anyone do that? That's why the system is broken, because well-meaning, good intentional individuals, or at least I hope so, made decisions to improve outcomes, but instead they just added more barriers because they simply didn't engage those individuals who it affected the most and ask them the simple questions of what would make it easier and what the problems they are facing are.
It's about listening, just listening, but deep listening.
It's listening to understand rather than listening to react.
I think that's such an important point. Honestly, I think this has been one of the most profound events we've had. Wouldn't you agree? Those of us that are here.
I just wanted to say how fantastic it is to listen to you wonderful women talking about your experiences, sharing really wholeheartedly what your journeys have been. Your journeys have been amazing, and there's so many aspects of it that I can resonate with, you know, and I do resonate with, and I think these stories are really important to share. If we're not sharing these stories, if we're not sharing our experiences, there is no way that we can expect to make the valid changes so necessary for the women and birthing people that we work with, but also for ourselves. You know, we matter as well as the staff who are working with the students. This work is so important, and unfortunately it is work, you know, and I think sometimes we forget that the amount of effort that is required, and it's a shame that, you know, it's called effort, but it is that. You know, it's a bit like labour. You have to go through it. You have to put the hard work in order to get the results at the end. And it's just really inspiring to hear you guys, to know that you're out there doing the work, as you know, as well. I know there are so many of us that are trying to put the work in, but you're doing it. The amount of work that you guys have done is incredible. So honestly, massive high five from me, because it is inspirational. It just gives me that little bit extra boost to make sure that we're doing what we can within our university setting to make change, to make a difference. We want to produce, I love the phrase, I was saying to one of my colleagues earlier, culturally intelligent midwives, you know, and that encompasses the cultural awareness, the cultural safety, all of those aspects. But actually you need to be able to put all of those aspects together in a really intelligent way so that we can, you know, effect change. So thank you very much, ladies. I really look forward to working with you more in the future. So thank you.
Like, just thinking, like over the last year, we've had to learn so much, you know, about running ASAM, you know, when it comes, it's been a whole different language for us, you know. It's finances, accounting, it's website, it's social media.
I'm going to cut you off here, Sundas, okay? I'm going to cut you off here because you say us very kindly, because it's you that's the backbone, okay? We know you do so much. Sundas is the backbone that brought us together and also keeps us together, because without Sundas, ASAM honestly wouldn't have been able to be as amazing as it is. And I really want to just say thank you.
And I
so much.
Second that. Thank you, Sundas. Thank you.
I think we've all done a lot for it. I mean, to be fair, you know, I think that if I hadn't met you two, you know, there would have been ASAM. And I'd just be sat here in my bedroom thinking, I need to do something, who do I speak to, you know. So this is another thing that I would say to anyone really. When I went to that RCM conference, I went alone with 9 months of experience of being a midwife. I didn't know anybody there. So you've got to put yourself into these situations, you know, to grow. Like Benash was saying earlier, to grow. Just do it. You know, even if you're the only person that's doing it, if you're doing something that is right, you should do it.
Yeah. I'm going to add one thing to the growth element. And Paula, thank you so much for your kind words. And you said that about growth and cultural intelligence, but anyone who is worried or struggling with putting yourself out there, making yourself uncomfortable and putting yourself in discomfort, just remember that they don't call it growing pains for no reason. Growth is painful. When babies are growing and they have growth spurts, they're up all night crying because it hurts. But if we want to push ourselves outside of our boundaries, then we need to embrace that discomfort, because we will grow from it and we will stretch ourselves and each other, hopefully.
We've got a question. How would you recommend bringing basic language skills to the classroom or an academic curriculum?
There is always this whole concept that I personally go off. There's a me problem, and then there's a you problem. There's things that I have in my capacity to be able to do to help me right now and me in the future. And there's things that other people have in their capacity and they can do. I can recommend to them, I can inform them, I can challenge them, I can respectfully move away from them, but they will have to be open. They will have to need to be open to make that difference or make that change. And until they are not in that space, all we can do is keep being the change that we want to see in the world. So I would make those recommendations happily, but until those ears are open to that, what we do and what we recommend everyone here does is be that change. And I'm going to quote Mahatma Gandhi over again and say, be the change you wish to be see in the world.
Definitely. You know, I'll go back to the saying, you know, ASAM grew from us wanting to make that change, you know, and like Paulie, you said it's work, and honestly it is work. It's meetings before night shifts, you know, it's coming home from like doing long days and like being like, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. But if you want that language skill, if you want it in your classroom, if you want it in your curriculum, you are the person that can do that. And I think for too long I felt like there were all these barriers, and I wouldn't like, we wouldn't be able to like jump over these hurdles, and we wouldn't be able to make these changes because we thought, oh, we can't do it because so and so. But it's just excuses we give ourselves, you know. If we are waiting for other people to bring in that change, we're going to be waiting forever. Like we've been going on and on about how it's been talk, reports after reports after reports, but nothing's happened. So I'll just reiterate what Benash said, be the change. You know, it is work, but if you want to create that change, then you've got to put the work in, you've got to put the effort in. You know, it's not easy, it's never going to be easy, but it's being able to look and appreciate that you've done something and it has come far. Like I always go back to thinking about what ASAM was like June 2020, and it was just an Instagram page, and suddenly it was more than an Instagram page. But yeah,
I just wanted to say thank you. It has been inspirational, and sometimes I think, especially at the moment, I've been a midwife for a very long time. So I'm Georgina, and I'm the department head of midwifery, and sometimes it can feel like you are actually hitting your head against a brick wall when you want lots of change. I was one of those as a student midwife. I was always going to the ASAM branches, meetings. I wouldn't ever consider myself to be political, but I think I probably am. And those on the call will probably say, of course you are, Georgina. But I think actually listen to you talk is really inspirational, because it makes you think, yeah, there are still people who care. There are still people who want to make a difference, and we need to work together. And I think it's listening to each other and sharing those stories that you've done that really makes you think from a different perspective. As you say, you open out. I love that. You know, I can't remember exactly, Benash, what you said about being in that echo chamber, but that really resonates, doesn't it? You just hear your own voice all the time. It's great to hear other people. So thank you very much.
I think the one massive issue I also have, I have lots of issues apparently, but one other issue I have is the fact that as midwives, we feel like we have to present a professional you know, outlook and a certain image. I mean, I'm sat here in my dungarees. I am sat here in my dungarees talking to you today because actually I'm more than my midwife. I'm more than my roles that I do. I'm more than all those titles I have. I am a friend. I am a sister. I am an aunt. I am all of those things. And all of those things make me the midwife I am. And we need to be able to just be the person we are and welcome others around us to be that person, so that we can treat people better and stop worrying about this fear of judgment and presumptions and assumptions and stereotypes and all of those things.
It's about not fitting in. because I fitted in for 20 years. But now, as Benash said, it's about being you and not being ashamed or not being embarrassed of who you are, how you dress, being proud of your South Asian heritage. It's about all that.
I'd just like to add one thing. We don't have all the answers. You know, we don't. We're on a journey, learning, trying to like surpass all these hurdles. I think all of us have little bits of that answer that will actually create that change, but you just need to find it within yourself, you know, and take that leap of faith and do it.